Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic.
Naruto jumped up and down around the field in utter celebration. He had on one of the biggest smiles in his life. And he had a good reason for it too. Naruto had done it. He made his own jutsu and it worked like a charm. Thanks to Kyuubi's advice, Naruto managed to make his jutsu work. Kyuubi-chan, did you see that? I did it. I made my own jutsu. Naruto spoke, still having his high fashion fun. Kyuubi chuckled at her container's words of excitement, and in truth she was happy. For an 8-year-old it certainly was a nice Kaden jutsu. It looked to be well over AC rank. Just you. I saw it, Kit. Nice work with that, but tell me, how did you do it? Kyuubi asked, dying to know her container's little secret. Naruto grinned and stopped his jumping around to answer her question. Breathe, Kyuubi-chan. I wasn't breathing enough. I had always used a small amount of breathe to try and make the jutsu work, but it wouldn't cut it. Yugito-chan taught me that Kaden justice take lots of oxygen to all for them to work, but I forgot that simple fact. When you told me to breathe, I remembered Yugito-chan's teachings. And they worked out perfectly, Naruto said, making Kyuubi chuckle. Naruto was about to return to camp until he saw B and Yugito running to position. Naruto-kun, what was that explosion we heard? Yugito asked. Naruto gave a simple grin which only aroused Yugito's ire about him, but B seemed to catch on to Naruto's smile. He remembered that he had such a face on when he made his first jutsu. The kid is certainly full of surprises. He's even younger than when you made your first jutsu, Hachibi said, making B give a mock shocked expression. Hey Hachi, don't be mean or I is gonna beat you like a bean, B replied, making Hachibi wonder why he didn't strangle his container right then and there. Meanwhile, Yugito kept trying to figure Naruto's smile out. Nibi had an idea, but she wanted Yugito to figure it out. Her container would be so jealous. Nibi had to admit that ever since Naruto showed up, she had a lot more fun with Yugito than she thought possible. Yugito glared at Naruto before giving a small smile. Well, Naruto-kun, what happened? Yugito asked. Naruto kept up his grin and motioned for the two to back up. Yugito and B raised their eyebrows, but complied with Naruto's wishes and backed up slightly. They suddenly saw Naruto go through various hand signs before the Kyuubi Jinchuriki yelled. Kaden. Hisatsu Kasai no Raiga, Naruto yelled, sending his spiraling flames of fire into a large boulder across the field, making it explode and destroying it. Yugito widened her eyes at the fire, and so did B. Yugito, being the Kaden expert, had gone through plenty of Kaden jutsus back in Kumo and she never saw one like that. When Naruto walked back, Yugito quickly grabbed his shoulders while still in shock. How did you do that? Where did you learn that jutsu? Can you teach it to me? All these questions and more Naruto was bombarded with by Yugito, and it still made him grin. One thing about Naruto, he loved to see Yugito's shocked face. It brought some form of joy to the blonde's life when he knew he could surprise her. Alright, Yugito-chan, in that order. You're a Kaden expert, you know how I did it. I didn't learn that jutsu, I created it, and lastly I can teach you it if you want, Naruto said, not knowing the massive thinking Yugito was doing when she heard those words. He created his own jutsu. It's at least a high C rank if not a low B rank. I haven't even done that yet. Alright Naruto-kun, I'm game. I'm not gonna lose to you, Yugito said, giving a small grin. Nibi sighed and shook her head at her jailer. Great, I wonder if I got this little crush thing confused with rivalry. Oh well, I'm sure Naruto-kun will give her a good time, Nibi thought to herself, smiling. After a few minutes of explanation, Naruto told Yugito and B about his progress over the past few days in perfecting his Just You. Both found the blonde boy exceptional and told him that he should tell about it so he could archive the jutsu. Imagine people's faces when they find out that an 8-year-old created a B-ranked Kaden jutsu. The people would have a field day about it. Well, Naruto-kun, You really surprised us. How did you come up with that jutsu anyway? Yugito asked. Naruto explained to Yugito and B about his dream to make a Kaden jutsu of his own, and it sort of came to him. He also mentioned that he went to the library to read up on some Justu theory books which Yugito noted for some later use. Alright Lil 9. Yuda, man, but we got to rest or we're gonna be late, B told them. Naruto and Yugito nodded before returning to their campsite. All three quickly went to sleep to rest for the next day. Next morning, Yugito stretched herself awake and yawned before turning her head around in her tent. She turned to see Naruto's face right in front of her, and the female Jinchuriki almost blushed at how cute his face looked. Yugito smiled seeing his face. He was always a handsome kid when he was asleep. It was sort of breezy today and the soft wind blew Naruto's hair, making it sway slightly. It gave Naruto a calming appearance that didn't seem to fit him when he was awake. It almost made Yugito forget that he was a Jinchuriki like her. Also, she knew she found Naruto to be her friend and her rival. She never got stronger for the sake of herself. It was always to simply do missions and get paid, but Naruto's drive to get stronger made her want to try harder also. The blonde genin was certainly a mystery to her, but she didn't mind in the least. He's certainly quite handsome sleeping. I just wanna ravish him right now, Nibi said, bringing her opinion into things. Yugito rolled her eyes and simply stared at Naruto a little more. Hey Nibi, Yugito called. What's up kitten? Nibi asked. Yugito brushed Naruto's hair slightly while she heard the small breaths that the blonde made. Do you think Naruto-kun knows about the feeling of crushes? Yugito suddenly asked. Nibi raised an eyebrow at the question as she wasn't expecting it, but did her best to answer. I'm sure he does kitten. I bet he had someone in Konoha that he liked, but I'm not sure. I at least think he's starting to see you that way. Granted, he might be a little young, but he did tell you about some of his life and having to do things for himself, not to mention he sure can cook and clean when it shifts between you two. He's definitely more mature than most his age, Nibi replied, making Yugito sigh. The female Jinchuriki walked out of her tent and quickly brushed her hair before putting her shoes on. B came out of his own tent with his usual clothes on, and after a few minutes was a drowsy Naruto wearing his black shirt and black pants with purple stripes. Turns out that Yugito's love for purple rubbed off on Naruto, and the blonde decided to get some of his own. After eating some breakfast, the three Jinchuriki came together for one last meeting. Alright, we are about 4 to 5 hours away from Rice Country. Remember that Kumo and Rice are still at a few odds with each other, so we have to play it cool, ya fools, B said, making Naruto and Yugito nod. Yugito was a bit nervous since she wasn't really the negotiating type, but she knew what was riding on this mission, and it helped that she'd rather not have a war on their hands. Well then, we have no time to waste then. Let's get going and get this mission over with, Naruto said, grabbing his swords. Yugito and B nodded and ran off to the trees, following Naruto to Rice Country. The dealing with Rice weren't anything major, but it did require some attention, as did all the other missions. All three ran to their destination, and as they ran, Yugito decided to learn a little more about Naruto. She knew quite a bit, but she still wanted to know more. Hey Naruto-kun, Yugito spoke, bringing the youngest blonde's attention to her. What's up Yugito-chan? Naruto asked. Yugito mentally stumbled a bit at how she should ask anything and wondered if this subject would affect her relationship with Naruto. Naruto in the meantime saw her struggling with herself, and it made him wonder what was wrong. He didn't like to see her worrying, and it only added to make him think of her a bit more. So Naruto-kun, Yugito finally spoke. Naruto turned his attention to her with his vibrant eyes meeting hers before the blonde woman continued. Would you mind telling me more about Konoha and your life? It's been about a month and a half since you came to Kumo, and I just want to know you more. You don't have to say, I just wanted to ask, Yugito added. Naruto's eyes lost their vibrant color and turned slightly ice cold. He looked in front of himself for a second and watched the passing trees. It was a sore subject for him, and he really wanted to know why she wanted to know, but she pretty much told him why. It did make him slightly smile that she wanted to know more about him, but it wasn't that pleasant to talk about. However, he trusted Yugito more than anyone else and she wouldn't judge him, so he turned to her. Alright, Yugito-chan. It's not much to say, but I'll tell you, Naruto said, making Yugito nod. B was also listening in, as were their respective Biju. Nibi and Hachibi wanted to know also, however Kyuubi regressed a little in her cage as Naruto started. He told Yugito about how most of his life was what people could basically call it, a survival game. He talked about the sneers that people gave him and how he was treated unfairly by mostly everyone. How he would get beat for simply showing his face around the village. Yugito balled her fists at the story while B narrowed his eyes. Nibi and Hachibi weren't any better, with the former thinking of ways to burn people to the ground. Naruto went on to talk about most of his friends who probably forgot that he was alive by now. He told about his once crush on a girl named Sakura, and Nibi had to smile when she saw Yugito give a slight scowl at that recent news. However, Naruto told them it was unrequited love and she would berate him constantly. It only got worse when his birthday rolled around. People seemed to be extra pissed at him and he wondered how he barely survived those nights, but he had to thank Kyuubi for it, which made the vixen blush slightly from the unneeded praise. Before everyone knew it, 2 hours had passed and Yugito looked at the ground. Naruto-kun, did you have any happiness at all? Yugito asked. Naruto chuckled softly at the question, but he could tell it was quite serious. Yes, I had a few people. I remember Iruka-sensei, who taught me during the academy days. There was Hokage Jiji along with Tsuki Oji-san and Ayame-chan. They made the best ramen. Those four were always the kindest to me. I really had no one else after that. Well, until I met you, Yugito-chan, Naruto proclaimed, making the Nibi Jinchuriki blush. B chuckled at that and it earned him a glare from Yugito, making him keep quiet. Thank you, Naruto-kun. I also know how it feels to be alone and hated. The only reason I'm here is because of B, Reikage, Samui, Karui and Omoi, Yugito said, making Naruto raise his eyebrows at her, wondering about the last three people she talked about. Who are those last three? Have I met them? Naruto asked her. Yugito shook her head before smiling. No, you haven't. Samui keeps to herself mainly, but she's known for her kindness at times. Karui is our very own loudmouth. And Omoi, well, he's our laid-back genin. He's a lot more suited to civilian by his nature, but he's quite good in kenjutsu just like you, Yugito explained. Naruto smirked and wondered what it was like to meet those three, which really had the blonde excited. The 4 hours had passed and the signs of Rice Country were coming into view. The trio of Jinchuriki left the trees and walked along the road with Yugito in the middle while Naruto and B flanked her from the sides as they entered Rice Country. Halt! State your status and reason for coming here, a Chunin stated while Yugito, Naruto and B took out their identification papers. Everyone flashed them to the Chunin while Yugito stated that they were here about the negotiations of Kumo and Rice Country. The Chunin immediately nodded and took the three to the hotel where the meeting would take place. In Kumo, and Mabui were currently in the Reikage mansion in the office looking at their three guests. Aside and placed his elbows on the table. He knew this was coming, he just wished it wasn't when Naruto was gone. Well, Hokage Dono, to what do I owe the pleasure of your company? I asked, making Sarutobi bow his head slightly at the Reikage. Greetings, Reikage Dono. I'd like to apologize for the sudden intrusion, but I would like to see Naruto Uzumaki, Sarutobi said, making Mabui narrow her eyes at him. Kakashi tensed slightly under her gaze and wondered why she was here, but her being the Reikage's assistant, she had every right to be here. I see, Hokage Dono, but I regret to inform you that Naruto Uzumaki is out on a mission right now and won't be back for maybe 2 to 3 days, Reikage announced. Jiraiya gave a small smile when he heard that, but knew better than to say anything. He also knew Tsunade was gonna be pissed when she learned that Naruto was alive. She definitely would have stayed in Konoha if she knew Naruto was alive, but that wasn't the case for either. Alright then, Reikage Dono, may I request that we be given accommodations until Naruto Uzumaki returns? Sarutobi asked. A narrowed his eyes at them before nodding and motioning for Mabui to get the paperwork done. Mabui nodded and started writing in her notepad while Sarutobi, Jiraiya, and Kakashi left the room. The instant they left, Mabui turned to A and could only glare at him slightly. Reikage-sama, why are we allowing them to stay? You know they are probably here to take Naruto from Kumo, Mabui said, raising her voice slightly. Mabui had liked Naruto. He was like the little brother she never really got. He was also the funniest person. During some of his free time, the blonde would help Mabui out with her paperwork, and she loved the fact that he could use Kage Bunshin. It made work so much easier. She would be damned if Konoha tried to take Naruto, and A knew that for a fact. Relax, Mabui. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. No matter how they deny it or don't like it, Naruto is a Kumo shinobi, and unless I hear from his lips, I don't want to stay in Kumo anymore. I'm not letting anyone take him. Plus, Sarutobi wouldn't risk a war with us over Naruto. Rest assured, Mabui, Naruto will be protected by Kumo, and they have to realize that, said, making Mabui nod. The assistant soon left to do the paperwork while A leaned in his chair while looking out the window. It's become a livelier place with him around. He at least keeps Kumo interesting, said to himself before making 2 Kage Bushins to help him with all the paperwork. Back with Naruto, Yugito, and B. All three had made it to their hotel and placed their things in their rooms. The places weren't the best in the world, but they got the job done alright, so the three copied with it all. After unpacking, the three sat in B's room and went over the plans for the meeting. Alright, the meeting begins late tonight. Lil 9, I want you in the room with Yugi-chan while she deals with Da, client. We gonna be cautious in case those fools be getting obnoxious, B rapped while Naruto turned to Yugito for a translation. Basically, Naruto-kun, you're going to be in the same room with me to watch the negotiations go down and will act if you see anything suspicious from their side, Yugito translated. Naruto nodded immediately while B continued. While Lil 9 does that, I'll be on Da, roof checkin' foe, any other fools, B added. Naruto knew that one and nodded. They all agreed with the plan and were on their way to look around the place they were in. B went off while writing some things in his small book. Naruto decided to go to the Rice Country Library and see if it had any Fuden Jutsu books. Meanwhile, Yugito went off into the woods to train her abilities since recently she found herself lacking in a few areas. With Naruto, Naruto had just left the library disappointed that they didn't have what he was looking for. It made everything a pain. He had exceptional knowledge with Raiden from B and good Kaden knowledge from Yugito, yet the blonde couldn't find anyone who could teach him Fuden techniques. Naruto sighed and walked around the town they were in for a bit. He saw various people conversing, and some of them were shady people at best. Naruto continued to walk through the town before he heard something near an alleyway that caught his interest. Are all the preparations complete? A man asked his partner. Naruto narrowed his eyes and leaned on wall before peeking around its corner to see the two men. One was quite tall, at least B's height, and the other seemed a bit taller than Yugito. Both were either bandits or rouges, but that was beside the point for right now. Yeah boss, it's all ready. Can you believe Kumo actually came here? I never liked them or Konoha. I can't wait to teach those 3 Kumo shinobi a lesson. Although, did you see the woman? She was kinda cute. How much do you think she's worth? The younger of the two asked. Naruto felt his rage flare from hearing that. B and Yugito taught Naruto that the shinobi world is just about as dangerous as it gets. People like this show up everywhere and there's not much one can do to stop it. Naruto at the time didn't know what they were talking about specifically, but a little explanation from Mabui and he pieced it together. Whether she makes good money or not isn't the issue. Remember that. Though I can't believe that our contractor was the country's daimyo. He must really hate Kumo to do this, but we're not here to care about that. Remember, we must the 3 before the meeting starts, and that's still quite a long ways off. the older person told the younger with a menacing tone. Well, looks like I have something to do, Naruto said, startling the two. Both men narrowed their eyes when they saw the Kumo headband before smiling. So Gaki was spying on us, huh? One of them said. Naruto gave a small grin and took out two of his swords and take a basic kenjutsu stance. Don't think I'm gonna let you two go after hearing all of that, Naruto said to them. The two men chuckled before the oldest snapped his fingers. Hearing that sound, 10 more people came out with clubs, wires, and broadswords. Naruto grinned at the odds of it being 12 on 1. So why not even those odds? Naruto crossed his fingertips before saying. Alright guys, answer me this question, what does a fox do when it's cornered? Naruto asked, looking around for an answer. All of the men ignored the question and advanced on the blonde while Naruto grinned. He gets allies to back him up. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto yelled, making 12 clones, all with their own sword, making some of the men sweat. Naruto charged at everyone with a fight erupting near the edge of town. With Yugito. Yugito was currently out in the woods practicing her taijutsu again, and she even found something interesting. She found out that being Nibi's Jinchuriki, she was granted a great sense of balance, and falling over was a rare thing to do. She always chalked that up to reflexes, but it turned out to be great for her taijutsu, which she was able to add more flexibility to her forms. Nibi watched her container train, and the female demon cat wondered what Yugito saw in Naruto that would make him a rival. However, she wasn't going to let this chance go for Yugito to go with her new feelings. So kitten, now that you found yourself a rival, what are you going to do? Nibi asked while Yugito threw 3 kunai at a tree, plating them in ascending order. Yugito stopped her training and wiped some sweat from her forehead before leaning against a tree. What do you mean, Nibi? Yugito asked. Nibi gave a small grin before snickering. Now that you have some common ground with Naruto-kun, are you going to profess your love for him? Nibi asked. Yugito narrowed her eyes at her Biju's question and sighed. The woman was definitely seeing a pattern somewhere down the road. Nibi, let's not go over this again, Yugito said before turning her head fast to the right. The blonde woman got to her feet and felt a massive chakra signature in the town. Naruto-kun, Yugito said to herself before jumping through the trees and heading back to the town for an investigation. With Naruto. Naruto huffed before he knocked out another bandit with the back end of his sword. They were certainly a tough group, and the blonde was having a bit of trouble. It turned out that one of them was a rouge shinobi and easily surpassed Naruto in skill. The others were simply grunts who did his dirty work. Naruto barely dodged a punch to the face and backflipped away from the rest of the group. Looks like I need more training, Naruto said to himself, and for some reason or the other, he knew Kyuubi was nodding with a grin across her face. You're not bad, Gaki, but it's time I got serious, the leader said, going through some hand signs. Naruto turned his head to see multiple people watching, and he didn't want anyone getting hurt in here. Naruto had to think of something fast, and he smirked. The blonde suddenly dodged a water dragon and hopped to the rooftops of a house. He then dashed away towards the forest, making the others follow him. Not a moment later did Yugito and B appear in the streets looking at the damage. B, did you feel Naruto's chakra? Yugito asked, starting to get a little worried. B nodded and they scanned for Naruto's chakra, but it was gone. Either he was suppressing it or something happened to him, and both were really hoping for the former. Meanwhile, Naruto had managed to bring the 6 extra members to the field, but they surrounded him, and the blonde still had the mysterious shinobi to deal with. I have to do something now. Yugito-chan and B-sensei can't fight with me all the time. I'll find some way to do this, Naruto said to himself, but all the guys laughed at him, with one walking up. It's too late to come up with a strategy, kid. Now you're going to die for sticking your nose in our business, one of the grunts said, making Naruto glare at him. I don't want to hear that from a grunt. Why don't you guys get lost and let me take that jackass right there, Naruto said, pointing to the only shinobi in the group. Everyone started cackling while holding their sides. You think you can beat Hiryu-sama? You must be delusional, one of them said before everyone saw Naruto's grin. Harayu walked into the circle and grinned. Well, Gaki, you've got balls, I'll give you that, but that won't guarantee your survival here. It only brings death, Harayu said, summing two axes to his hands. Naruto looked at his two precious swords that bought him and his gripped the handles tightly. I'm not gonna die. Not until I become the Raikage of Kumo, Naruto yelled, charging at the man. Both clashed as the spark from their weapons dropped to the ground. Naruto gritted his teeth and knew he was at a disadvantage. This guy was so much stronger than him and more skilled. The blonde would have to be a bit cunning in this fight. Harayu tried to slash at Naruto, but the blonde parried the strike with his sword before bring his other sword around trying to slash at Harayu's stomach, but the man evaded the attack easily and backed away. Naruto narrowed his eyes and watched the man go through some hand signs while Naruto went through his own. Suidan no Jutsu, Harayu yelled, making a water dragon charge at Naruto, but the blonde finished his hand signs also and yelled. Kaden. Psycho Neppa, fire release. Supreme heat wave, Naruto sent the blazing fire at the dragon and the two collided, forming a mist that covered the entire field. It was difficult to see in the mist, and knowing that he was surrounded didn't make this any better, but then Naruto got an idea. This mist still had traces of water inside and it made the best situation for the blonde. Harayu walked through the mist looking for his target while gripping his axes tightly. Come out, kid. Take your punishment like a man. Harayu yelled out. Slowly Naruto's figure came into view and Harayu readied his weapons. He charged the blonde, and quickly appeared in front of him. Die! Harayu screamed, sending his axes slashing through Naruto's small body. He smirked in that instant that he got rid of the small problem, but it only added to the shock he was feeling when it poofed into smoke. A cage bunshin, Harayu wondered, but it didn't last as 7 more clones shot through the mist knowing they found him. Harayu couldn't react in time before all the clones bomb rushed him into the ground, keeping him still, but they were quickly losing their edge and told Naruto to hurry up. Harayu looked up to see Naruto moving, though quite a few hand signs before the blonde smiled and made his right hand cackle. Lariat! Naruto yelled, charging with his arm slamming into the man's throat. Normally a hit from an 8-year-old wouldn't do much, but considering that Naruto had charged his arm with Raiden Chakra and the fact they were still in a mist which is filled with water, well, it would hurt a lot. Harayu screamed out as the lightning in Naruto's arm intensified from the mist around them, nearly frying Harayu inside out. All the men on the outside heard the scream and wondered what was going on with them. Naruto huffed and dropped to his knees before looking at Harayu's face. It screamed electrocution and the blonde widened his eyes. He just had his first. Naruto gasped and saw Harayu's lifeless face. Why'd him? Naruto softly said, then the mist dissipated and all the men saw Harayu's body and began screaming at Naruto. Heed Harayu-sama. That brat, they all yelled. Naruto flinched at the last words as they brought up some terrible memories for him, but the blonde couldn't move. 1 from the overuse of chakra and 2 from the revelation of him having his first. It all made Naruto scared for the first time in his life. All the men neared Naruto, but they were stopped by a fireball and a shot of lightning. Everyone looked up to see Yugito and be in the trees before dispatching to the ground to help Naruto. Naruto-kun, are you alright? Yugito asked. Naruto couldn't look her in the eyes. He just couldn't. Not after what he did. Naruto-kun, what happened? Yugito asked while B turned to the remaining guys with a glare. Nibi, what's wrong with Naruto-kun? Yugito asked and Nibi looked at the blonde with saddened eyes. Kitten, it's trauma. Naruto-kun has probably nevered before and the grief is hurting him. Kitten, you and B better get ready, Nibi suggested and cut the connection. Yugito and B saw Naruto turn his eyes to them and snarled. Naruto's growl deepened and he lowered his back and the chakra only continued to grow around him as a tail appeared behind the blonde. Yugi-chan, that's the one-tailed form. We have to find some way to reach Lil 9. He's young and Kyuubi's chakra can easily get into his chakra coils. If we don't calm him down, He'll try to destroy everything in his sight, B told her. Yugito nodded and was about to take a kunai, but she stalled. B, you stay back. Let me handle Naruto-kun, Yugito told him. B narrowed his eyes at her through his sunglasses and wanted to stop Yugito from going through whatever she had planned, but he relented. Alright Yugi-chan, I'll stay close just in case, B said backing up into a tree in the woods. Yugito faced Naruto and the blonde female talked to her Biju one more time. Nibi mind giving me some chakra also? Yugito asked. Nibi wondered what he container was thinking, but nodded and Yugito began to gain her own feral features. Her claws sharpened and her eyes turned to slits. Yugito grew one tail. Naruto growled at her and ran at the Chunin in a fit of anger and Yugito did the same. B watched the two clash and the impact made a loud noise. The impact even made the tree leaves sway slightly and B had to sweat a little. Do you think she can do it? Hachibi asked bringing B to talk with his container while watching the fight. I'm not sure Hachi, but I know Yugi-chan and she's a tough lil cat. She gonna bring our lil fox back oh yeah. B stated making Hachibi roll his eyes, but he hoped that what B said was the case. Yugito and Naruto gripped each other's hand and gritted their teeth at each other with their chakra flaring. Right now Yugito had to curse the fact that Naruto got stronger with his training. Her being older, she was still stronger than him, but Naruto was giving her somewhat of a hard time currently. Naruto-kun calm down. It's alright, Yugito said, but Naruto didn't let up and sent a swift kick at Yugito's face. Yugito dodged the kick by jumping in the air and with her body's natural flexibility she managed to get around Naruto and held the blonde in a submissive position with her hand tightly holding his while he was pinned to the ground. Naruto-kun please calm down, Yugito pleaded, but Naruto wasn't done as he sent his tail around her waist and made it constrict her. Yugito gasped and released her hold on Naruto's arm and the blonde stood to his feet before turning to his captive target. Naruto pulled his right fist back and the chakra intensified to that one point and the blonde growled before letting out his punch towards Yugito. Yugito braced for the hit and she felt the wind get knocked out of her when she was sent into the forest with a loud crash. B gasped and Naruto roared out in the distance. Meanwhile, Yugito allowed Nibi's chakra to heal her chest and the blonde female smiled. If only he could control Kyuubi's chakra. Though I can understand how Naruto-kun feels. I remember my first. It wasn't pleasant, Yugito remembered until she heard Nibi's voice. Are you kidding? You didn't say anything to me for a damn week. It was the most boring time of my life and you just moped around the house. Thank Kami for your cage and his assistant or you might have died from starvation, Nibi said making Yugito chuckle before she stood to her feet and dusted off her clothes. Yeah well, I'd better get back. Naruto-kun needs me and I want to help him, but damn that hurt, Yugito said making Nibi chuckle. Yugito applied chakra to her feet and shot off for the plains again. Naruto meanwhile, continued to roar out his anger issues and B could tell he wasn't going to get better anytime soon and the Hachibi Jinchuriki was about to intervene until he saw Yugito shoot out from the trees and launched herself at Naruto. Naruto turned around and snarled at her, but before he could react Yugito punched Naruto in the jaw sending the Kyuubi blonde into a tree and the impact made the tree collapse while Naruto's growl got even stronger. He's pissed, Yugito said while Nibi nodded. Meanwhile, Kyuubi was trying all she could to separate her chakra from Naruto's coils, but they were too free and the seal stopped her from doing too much. She would have to get him to calm down before she could get the chakra out of his body. B continued to watch the taijutsu fight between Yugito and Naruto take place and had to admit that Naruto really could stand his ground, even if he was using Kyuubi's chakra. He could also tell that Yugito was keeping this fight strictly taijutsu on her part. He noticed that she had plenty of time to do a jutsu, but she wouldn't and neither would Naruto. The fighting had been for over an hour and Yugito felt like she was only making Naruto angrier, especially when she saw the second tail on Naruto grow. Yugito would have gone to her Biju state, but that would have been overkill and she didn't want that, but she was running out of options and she really needed one. How could she get to Naruto? How could she get him to calm down? Kitten, how well do you trust me? Nibi asked, making Yugito raise an eyebrow at he question. Sorry Nibi, kinda got my hands full here, Yugito said, dodging a punch from Naruto, who managed to extend it by using Kyuubi's chakra as an attack. Nibi rolled her eyes at her container's words before sighing. I have an idea on how to help Naruto-kun, but it's a long shot and I don't know if it's gonna work, Nibi said, piquing her container's interest. What is it? Tell me Nibi. If I can help Naruto-kun I'll take it, Yugito said, making Nibi mentally chuckle at her container. Alright kitten, listen carefully, Nibi said, and began to tell Yugito her plan. It was hard to listen to Nibi and protect herself from Naruto, but she could manage it. When Nibi finished, Yugito had to admit it was a good plan, but she was a bit skeptical of the way it was supposed to work. So when I grab Naruto-kun you'll have tried to suppress his chakra and Kyuubi will pick up on your plan and I have to go into Naruto-kun's mind and talk him out of it. Yugito asked, trying to sum it all up. Nibi nodded with that assessment before Yugito made one last comment. And if this goes wrong my consciousness will fade along with Naruto-kun's and we'll be lost forever. Once again Nibi nodded and Yugito gasped before ducking underneath a punch from Naruto and backflipped away before huffing. You know that insane, right? Yugito asked, and Nibi smiled at her container. Of course I know, but you don't want to hurt him and you're getting exhausted. As far as I'm concerned, if you don't resort to using ninjutsu then this is your only option, Nibi countered, and Yugito had to curse under her breath slightly. Alright, well it's all we've got so let's do it, Yugito said, dropping from her taijutsu stance and stood perfectly still. Bee and Hachibi wondered what she was doing, but the last to wonder what she was doing was Naruto. The blonde snarled and Yugito closed her eyes and her breathing slowed. Naruto growled and charged at Yugito with his claws flaring with chakra. Bee sweated and yelled out, Yugi-chan. Naruto neared Yugito and was about to strike her, but the Nibi Jinchuriki opened her eyes fast and lunged for Naruto, but it wasn't an attack of any kind. Yugito grabbed Naruto into a tight hug and held the blonde close. Bee raised an eyebrow, but suddenly Naruto started to thrash around, but suddenly he fell silent. However, the red chakra was still there. It baffled Bee slightly, but he saw Yugito's forehead pressed to Naruto and her eyes were closed. What do you think she's doing? Bee asked his container. Hachibi wasn't sure either, but he had a feeling it was Nibi's doing, or at least the Vat Demon had some role in this. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, it looks risky. You better keep back, unless you want your rapping career to end with your voice, Hachibi said, leaving Bee to wonder what he meant by that. However, once Yugito pressed her head to Naruto's, Kyuubi got the picture idea just like Nibi said she would and smiled. Looks like Nibi-chan came through. All that's left is to reel in that chakra and no more demon Naruto. Now all that's left is for her container to do the trick, Kyuubi said to herself and carefully started to pull back her chakra. Meanwhile, Yugito was wandering aimlessly around in the dark. She had no idea where she was going and she couldn't hear Nibi either. Yugito figured that she made it and kept walking, not sure where she was going. Well, I'll figure this out later. I have to find Naruto-kun, Yugito said and started to run further into the dark. Yugito cursed her luck. She'd been running for who knows how long and she couldn't find Naruto anywhere. It worried her if she did even make it to his mind, but now wasn't the time to second guess herself. Yugito continued to run until the darkness began to warp into streets. Yugito wondered what was up, but people started to come into view and so did a little boy. Demon. Murderer. You should just die. You will never belong here. All these comments were directed at the boy and Yugito's anger flared, but she didn't have the time to go through this and continued. She continued to walk and saw the boy again, but he was more grown. He was 8 years old, had blonde hair, and whisker marks. Wait. Whisker marks. Naruto-kun. Yugito called and watched the young Naruto run away. Yugito chased after him and tried calling some more, but before she knew it the streets and houses were gone and she soon came up to a tree. Yugito looked at the scenery and saw it was quite beautiful. The trees swayed along with the flowers in the field and she smiled, but she heard crying. It's my fault. They were all right. I'm nothing but a demon. Why'd him? It's all my fault, Naruto said as he huddled close to his knees. Yugito saw him crying and it made her heart tighten before the female blonde knelt down and offered her biggest smile. Hello Naruto-kun. Why are you crying? Yugito asked, making the blonde look up in shock. Why Yugito-chan, why are you here? Naruto asked. Yugito smiled and brought Naruto into a small hug, making the blonde blush slightly from her soft touch. I'm here cause I'm worried about you, silly. Now Naruto-kun, tell me, what's the matter? And why are you crying? Yugito asked, making Naruto stop blushing and look at the ground. I why'd that man Yugito-chan. He said things about attacking us cause we were from Kumo and I fought them before they could do anything. Me and their leader fought and why'd him. Everyone was right Yugito-chan. I'm nothing but a demon, Naruto said, shocking Yugito with his words. The Nibi Jinchuriki knew about Rice Country and some of its hostilities with Kumo, but that's why this negotiation of trading agreements was being made. However, it seemed that it wouldn't be that easy. Yugito gave Naruto a small smile and pulled him even closer. Want me to tell you a secret, Naruto-kun? Yugito asked, causing Naruto to look at her in some small amount of shock. He wasn't expecting that question, but his curiosity got the better of him and he nodded. Yugito slightly chuckled and sighed while looking at the blue sky of Naruto's mindscape. My life was rough also. I'm sure you know why, but you probably handled yours better than I did. My first was actually a Kumo civilian, Yugito said, making Naruto go wide-eyed. Why you to Kumo civilian? Why? Naruto asked as he started to get into the story. Yugito chuckled and rubbed the back of her head. Well, it was kind of complicated. I knew people only saw me as Nibi and they all resented me for that. B had been through it longer than me, so naturally their opinion of him was already quite high, but they hated me. I was always alone in the village and would generally get chased by civilians and shinobi alike who were after my life. However, there was one civilian who was different. He said that people were fools for calling me that. He said people were too bigoted and needed to grow up. I adored him after that. He would let me stay with him and eat with him. Those were the happiest days of my life apart from now, but, Yugito paused to find her voice and Naruto panicked. Why Yugito-chan, you don't have to tell me, Naruto quickly said, but Yugito shook her head and slightly calmed down. Naruto looked at her with much sadness in his eyes. He never liked to see Yugito this way. He never liked to see her sad or angry or upset. He liked the smiling Yugito. The one who saved him from Konoha and who helped train him. The very same Yugito he made his rival and best friend. It's alright Naruto-kun. Let me continue, Yugito said in a pained voice. Naruto merely nodded and allowed her to talk and take her grief away. He came home one day and looked stressed. I wanted to know what was wrong, so I made him some of his favorite tea and gave it to him, but he swatted it away and made it crash to the floor. I saw his eyes and they scared me. He kept saying that something was my fault and slammed me to a wall. I struggled to get free before he looked at me. He said he tried to do what his wife wanted, which was to bear no hatred towards me for being Nibi's Jinchuriki, but he couldn't handle it anymore and flew into a rage. He grabbed a kitchen knife and tried to stab me multiple times, but I got away from him and grabbed a knife of my own to defend myself from him, but he only laughed and ran at me. I closed my eyes and waited for my death, but it never came. I opened them and saw my knife lunged at his chest. Why'd him and I didn't know how to deal with it. I flew into a rage also and it took Raikage-sama and B to keep me calm. Naruto-kun, what I told you I've never told anyone. I still feel bad about that day. He was the only person to praise me or even say, I love you. He was like my father and why'd him. Mabui helped me through the pain and so did Raikage-sama and B. Naruto-kun, you aren't a demon. You'd because you did it to protect me and B. It's alright Naruto-kun, Yugito said with tears falling down her eyes. However, she was surprised when Naruto hugged her. She should have been the one hugging him, right? Yugito-chan, I'm sorry. I didn't know how you felt about anything. Thank you, Yugito-chan. I'll keep getting stronger. I'll protect you, B, Agigi, and Kumo. I'll become the Raikage Yugito-chan. Also, Yugito-chan, there's something I have to tell you, Naruto said, making Yugito look up at him. She felt calmed by his words, and it brought a small spark to her heart to hear them. What is it, Naruto-kun? Yugito asked. Naruto blushed and looked at the ground, which wasn't missed by Yugito, who wondered what he was going to say. I'm not sure of all my feelings yet, but Yugito-chan, I think or I believe I love you, Naruto said, making Yugito widen her eyes. She didn't say anything, and Naruto simply squeezed her tighter. I think I can make you happy, Yugito-chan. I know I can. I always keep my promises, and I promise to make you happy. I know I'm too young for you, but I'll get older and I'll get stronger. You've helped me so much, Yugito-chan. Let me help you for a change, Naruto said in his confession. Yugito was still on the fact that Naruto said he loved her was quite the shock for the Nibi Jinchuriki. Yugito wasn't sure of her feelings for Naruto, but she had to admit that they were rather strong than usual. If she thought about it, this was weird. If she didn't really care for him, then she wouldn't have done such a drastic measure to get in here to calm Naruto down. Yugito stared at Naruto and noted the seriousness in his eyes. Yugito smiled, but it didn't last long before she laughed, making Naruto blush in embarrassment. What's so funny? Naruto asked while Yugito rolled around on the makeshift grass. Sorry, Naruto-kun. Nothing's funny, I promise, but you made me feel better. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Shinobi law says that you an adult when you wear that headband, but for a safe measure, why don't you make Chunin, then I'll be yours, Yugito suggested. Naruto's eyes gleamed at her words and he nodded fast with a smile. You got it, Yugito-chan. Just watch, I'll be even stronger than you, and with Kyuubi-chan's help you and Nibi won't stand a chance, Naruto said, making Yugito playfully glare at him. Oh, what makes you think you can beat me? I've never lost to you, Yugito said, and Naruto glared back. Keep saying that, Yugito-hime. I'll surprise you even more, Naruto told her. Yugito chuckled with a nod and grabbed Naruto's hand. Shall we go now? She asked. Naruto nodded and the two disappeared in a white light. Back outside, B was amazed to see Naruto's chakra receding by into the seal, and so was Yugito's. Kyuubi had finally pulled out the last remnants of chakra in Naruto's coils. Nibi, in turn, severed the mental connection between Naruto and Yugito as the two Jinchuriki slumped to the floor. Both blinked at the sudden instance of light, but it wasn't long before they smiled. How ya fools doin'? Dad must have been a good hug for y'all. B wrapped in Naruto was in too much of a good mood to say anything to B. Well, it's done. Come on, we have to get changed and get ready for the meeting, Yugito said, walking off, but not before Naruto and B took notice of the blush across her face. Naruto smiled at that, but B wondered what it was about as the three Jinchuriki walked off. Wow, kitten, something good must have happened to you. You're blushing up quite a storm. Wait. Don't tell me. Nibi said, making Yugito's blush creep even further. Not a word, Yugito merely said, walking off. The three Jinchuriki simply went back to their hotel to get ready and begin their negotiations. However, Naruto had something to say to his own Biju. Hey Kyuubi-chan, Naruto said, making Kyuubi stir. She was tired and wanted sleep, so when he called she was kinda irate. What is it, Kit? Can't you see I'm dead tired here? Kyuubi said, and Naruto winced, but nodded slowly. Yeah, I just wanted to say sorry and thank you, Naruto spoke, shocking the vixen slightly. For what? She asked. Naruto chuckled and leaned on one of the hotel walls. I know you tried to keep the chakra back and helped Yugito-chan save me. I don't know what I would have done without you, Naruto said, and Kyuubi all of a sudden forgot about her sleep or her irritated attitude. Forget it, Kit. I can't have you dying yet. Not after such a promise to Nibi's container. You really are a sly fox, Kit. I'm so proud, Kyuubi said, and Naruto's sweat dropped slightly. Well, I won't keep you, and I just wanted to say that. Also, don't leave me Kyuubi-chan. Be my partner and stay by my side, Naruto said, and Kyuubi just had to blush at the way he said that. Sure kit. Well, try not to do anything else excessive for the rest of the day. I'm beat. Goodbye, Kyuubi said and cut the connection. What's wrong with me? They're just words, right? Man, I have a weird container, Kyuubi said mentally before closing her eyes and going to sleep while wrapping her 9 tails around her form like a coat. I'll do it, Yugito-chan. I know I can make you happy, Naruto said as he closed the door to his room, obviously in a happy mood. 2 days later, Team Jinchuriki had finished its negotiations with Rice 2 days ago and were headed back to Kumo. Thanks to Yugito and Naruto, the mission and negotiations had gone off really well. Yugito had told the daimyo about the attempt act of aggression at them when they were attacked by people in Rice country and demanded compensation. The daimyo didn't take that well, but he complied to her request and Kumo got most of the benefits with the trading agreements. As it turned out, the people who attacked them were people hired by the daimyo to get rid of the Kumo shinobi, but since they all lived, he was backed into a corner and badly. No other attempts were made on their lives after then, and they left with ease and the Rice daimyo's seal of approval to their trade agreement. Naruto and Yugito had seemingly gotten closer over the 2 days, which was something that B didn't miss. Naruto and Kyuubi were even talking more, and the blonde got to know his vixen a little more. Kyuubi told him about some of her life, which mainly spoke of simply being around the world and trying not to humans for the simple joy of it. Naruto made it a note not to piss Kyuubi off ever. It was long and tiring, but the 3 Jinchuriki finally made it back to Konoha and they were dead tired. All the running back was such a pain. They all just wanted to go and report their mission was a success, then go home and simply do nothing all day. The 3 trudged up the stairs to the Raikage mansion and knocked on the door. Come in, A said, making Naruto, Yugito and B come through the door. The sight Naruto saw shocked him. He saw Sarutobi, Jiraiya, and someone he didn't know in the room with the Raikage and Mabui. Naruto-kun. Sarutobi yelled, bringing Naruto into a fierce hug. Yugito and B turned to A for an explanation, but they were filled in by Mabui. Gigi, how have you been? Naruto asked, returning the hug. Jiraiya and Kakashi smiled at the contact, and before long everyone was back to seriousness with Naruto standing near Raikage. Mission accomplished. Gigi. Yugito Haim has the documents in her pocket, Naruto told him. A nodded and chuckled at the Haim nickname Naruto said while Yugito gave A the document. A looked it over and nodded before putting it away in his drawer. So Gigi, what's this about? Why is Hokage Gigi here? Naruto asked. A turned his gaze to Sarutobi and allowed the Hokage to talk. Naruto-kun, I came here to say I'm sorry. If I had been more attentive in my actions, you would still be in Konoha, Sarutobi said. Naruto looked at the ground and slowly nodded. It's all right, Gigi. I'm happy here. I have A Gigi, Mabui Onichan, B Sensei, and Yugito Haim, Naruto replied, making the 4 smile at him. Sarutobi smiled also, as did Jiraiya and Kakashi. The old Hokage only nodded and knelt down towards Naruto. I guess this means you can't take my hat then, Sarutobi said, and Naruto gave a sad smile and nod, but then cheered up and turned to A. No Gigi, but I can take A Gigi's hat, Naruto proclaimed, making B and Yugito smile while Mabui snickered before raising her eyebrows at him. A, on the other hand, chuckled at Naruto's proclamation and looked at the blonde. What makes you think you can take my hat? A asked. Naruto smirked and shrugged his shoulders. I'll just do it. I'll be the Raikage of Kumo. I'll become the strongest Raikage. I'll be even stronger than you, Gigi, Naruto said, and suddenly the entire room shook in laughter at Naruto's words. You're going to have a handful with Naruto here, Jiraiya said, making a nod. Don't I know it, but I feel he could do it. Though the brat can be cheeky at times, a joke, making everyone nod. Sarutobi gave a soft smile when he saw Naruto pout at the Raikage and saw Mabui, B, and Yugito laughing with him. Yep. He belongs here. Minato, Kushina, you'd be proud of your son, Sarutobi said mentally and walked up to Naruto. Naruto-kun, come here. I have something for you. It was meant to be given to you when you either turned 16 or became a chunin of Konoha, but since you're a Kumo shinobi, I want to give you something that I had denied you, Sarutobi said as he turned to Jiraiya. The Sannin nodded and took out a scroll and applied chakra to it. Soon loads of things came out, surprising everyone. Naruto-kun, you are the son of Konoha's Yondaime, Minato Namikaze, and Kushina Uzumaki. You were supposed to be seen as their hero and savior, but that wasn't the case. Here is your inheritance. The compound itself is sealed in another of Jiraiya's scrolls. Here, Naruto-kun, read this note, Sarutobi said, handing Naruto the piece of paper. Yugito and B were surprised. Naruto was the son of the famed Yondaime, the only person who was said to be faster than A. Mabui was also surprised and saw her little brother in a better light. A was a mess, he couldn't believe those words, but looking closely he saw Naruto's resemblance to Minato and it shocked him the most. Naruto read the small piece of paper and scanned the words. To Naruto Uzumaki. Hey son, this is your 2-san. If you're reading this, then you should know that both me and your mother are gone. I'd like to say that it wasn't true, but sadly it is. Kyuubi is outside our gates and we can't hold it much longer. I want to tell you that I love you and so does Kushina. I know I'm being selfish here with my plan of making you a Jinchuriki, but I know you can tame the beast and its power. If you're wondering why I had Sarutobi hide it from you, well, Iwa always did have a sore spot for me and I didn't want you to be in danger every waking moment of your life, so I had you hidden under your mother's name. Grow strong, Naruto. I know you'll make me and your Ka-san proud. Oh, looks like I have to go. You should see this. I'm writing to you while you're asleep in this room right now. Goodbye, my son. Take my compound and all its contents. I leave my famed jutsu with you, namely the Rasengan and Hiraishin no Jutsu. Make us proud, son, and hold you head up high. Your father and mother, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Naruto cried softly from the letter and tucked it away in his pocket. Everyone remained silent for him for a few minutes before Kakashi came up to Naruto. Naruto, I'm Kakashi Hatake. I was a student of your father and he taught me everything I know. When Kushina had you, all he talked about was how he would like to see you grow up in the house and someday have a family of your own. Don't be depressed, Naruto. Minato-sensei wouldn't want to see you like this, Kakashi said before stepping back. Naruto looked at the ground and cried a bit more before giving a soft smile. Thank you, Gigi, I'll do it then. I'll make them both proud. Here in Kumo, I'll make them proud as a shinobi, Naruto said, and Jiraiya smiled and then sealed all the things back into the scrolls. Jiraiya handed it to Naruto and the blonde took it in his arms. Raikage Dono, with your permission, I'd like to arrange a treaty of Kumo and Konoha, Sarutobi said out of the blue, making everyone widen their eyes at him. A raised an eyebrow at him before asking. Why? Sarutobi turned from it to Naruto and back. I know I couldn't protect Naruto, but I know you can. However, I wouldn't want there to be any hostilities between us if Konoha does encounter Kumo. Most people have forgotten Naruto or others believe he's dead. Maybe it's simply an old man's wish, Sarutobi said while rested his elbows on the table before sighing. I'll think about it, I responded. Sarutobi nodded and Kakashi, Jiraiya, and himself exited the room, leaving only the 5 of them in the room. Well, it's not every day you hear news like that, Mabui said, making everyone nod. So Lil 9, what are ya gonna do? B asked. Naruto smirked and turned to everyone. I'll show Konoha what it missed out on since Kumo is obviously the best, Naruto stated, making everyone chuckle. Yugito smiled at the blonde before someone spoke. Well, the Yondaime's son. Now he's good looking and strong. So I guess Miss Yugito Uzumaki or Yugito Namikaze are good names, Nibi joked, making Yugito blush deeply. Nibi. The blonde woman yelled out, making Nibi smile. Naruto, B, and Yugito then headed for the door before Naruto turned around. And besides, Gigi, if I'm gonna take that hat, I'm gonna need all the training and help I can get, Naruto said, closing the door, leaving Mabui and A in the room. You know, I think he was serious about becoming Raikage, Mabui said, making a nod. Quite a bit of time had passed in Naruto's life since he lived in Kumo. The blonde had grown into quite the young man. Gone was the blonde child, but stood a blonde handsome young man. Naruto was a lot taller and slimmer. Gone was most of the baby fat that was across his body. His muscles started to show, but not too much. His hair was still as spiky as ever, but he was starting to grow small bangs on the sides of his face. He really looked like his father when he was put up to a picture. Naruto had gotten stronger over his 5 years of life also. Thanks to B, Yugito and Kyuubi, the blonde was able to be quite proficient in Kaden and Raiden jutsu. He still didn't know any Fuden jutsu, what with the lack of Fuden experts in Kumo, but he was still good nonetheless. Naruto had even mastered the Rasengan in his training, but the Hiraishin was beyond him at the moment. Naruto had the money his parents sent him in a Kumo bank account for some safety. He could already be a bachelor, but he was too young for that anyway. His intellect was also quite sharp due to reading countless books given to him to help him study. He had become quite the genin throughout his training. Yugito had even introduced him to 3 other genin that she had known about. They were Samui, Karui, and Omoi. Karui had red hair and along with that a fiery personality. She was relatively dark-skinned and her eyes were the darkest shade of yellow that Naruto had ever seen. She wore a long sword on her back that Naruto had gotten her for a gift along with B. He had met her when she wanted to be trained by B using the sword and the two practiced together in their spare time. Karui had taken to Naruto quite fast when they trained and the two were quite inseparable. Karui, being a few months older than Naruto, she had made him her surrogate little brother. Since then Karui was overprotective of Naruto at times and almost assaulted quite a few of the younger girls who would try to get with Naruto at times. Naruto had also seen Karui as an older sister pretty much like Mabui. Omoi was quite laid back to Naruto. He was also dark-skinned, but he had short, white, spiky hair with dark eyes. Like Naruto and Karui, Omoi had a sword also. It fascinated Naruto that Omoi always had a lollipop in his mouth, but Naruto couldn't deny his friend's skill. Omoi was quite smart and calculative. He was sometimes overly cautious in things, but being in this profession it was probably a good thing that he was, but Naruto still liked Omoi nonetheless. Omoi and Naruto had become close friends, not as close as Karui, but still close enough. Yugito had been happy that Naruto had his friends and they all seemed to like him. Naruto, Karui and Omoi had become quite the group of kenjutsu users as they were better than most Chunin thanks to their training with B. Naruto had been the strongest kenjutsu user in their group, but Karui was a close second to him and Omoi was the third, but mostly because of his laziness. Lastly, but certainly not least was Samui. Samui was quite a slender woman and to Naruto she was quite hot by his standards. Unlike Karui and Omoi, Samui was fairly light-skinned and had short, blonde hair. She was a bit taller than Naruto, but only by a few inches. Her eyes were light blue as compared to Naruto's dark blue eyes. Naruto had to admit that not many girls looked as cute as Samui, but he did say that Yugito was one of the very few who was. When Naruto first met Samui, he had to admit that it was hard to talk to her. She seemed a lot more mature than Karui and Omoi, not to mention she was quite calm and mostly silent at times. It took Naruto a bit of time to talk to her freely since she didn't say much, but over the months, the two had gotten closer. Samui had even introduced Naruto to her brother, Atsui. Naruto found Atsui to be like him a bit, but the blonde had limits where Atsui didn't. Samui and Naruto had also been on one mission so they were quite close. One thing Naruto noticed about Samui was that she had the habit of saying, "cool," a lot, not that he minded. He figured it was the same as him saying, "Dadbayo." Naruto even saw Samui as another older sister and Samui saw Naruto as her little brother also. Samui used a tanto instead of the swords that Karui and Omoi had, which she kept hidden. All in all, Naruto had gotten real close to Karui, Omoi, and Samui. He had his two sisters and his best friend. I had recently made the four of them a team with B as the sensei and Yugito as the assistant sensei to B. It was a bit of a group, but they had the best results in any mission. It also went well that Kumo and Konoha had signed an alliance treaty. Jiraiya had seen Naruto on multiple occasions and the trading was great for each nation, though when Konoha learned that Naruto was alive and well in Kumo, most were quite upset, but others were happy that the demon was off in another village. But some of the council tried to persuade Sarutobi to get Naruto back, but it all ended in failure, especially for Danzo, since he couldn't go after the Kyuubi anymore. At least he would have to be more secretive now. Naruto and his team were currently on their way to the Raikage mansion along with B and Yugito for some good news that would be announced when they arrived. Naruto and Karui were quite eager to hear the news. "Ne o Tudo, what do you think the good news is?" Karui asked, making Naruto grin. "It beats me, Karui Onichan, but I bet it's gonna be cool," Naruto said, making Karui smirk, and so did Samui at the use of her favorite word. "Maybe it's to tell Karui that her flat chest has actually grown a few inches this time," Omoi responded, making Karui grow a tick mark on her head. The redhead was about to retort, but someone decided better. "What was that, Omoi?" Naruto asked, narrowing his eyes at his friend while slowly drawing his sword at his face. Omoi gulped and backed up slightly from Naruto since he knew Naruto was better than him at using the sword. Nothing, Naruto. Sorry, my tongue slipped, Omoi stated, and Naruto eased up, then kept his sword sheathed. He then nodded and continued walking towards the Raikage mansion. Karui smiled and turned to Omoi, Samui, Yugito and B. "That's my Otudo right there. I'm so proud," Karui said with a grin before running off to catch up to her surrogate little brother. Samui then patted Omoi on the shoulder and gave a small, comforting smile. "Well, Omoi, it looks like you're screwed if Karui's protected by Naruto," Samui said to him. Omoi sighed with a nod and walked while slumping his shoulders. Yugito and B chuckled at the actions of their team, and it made the group that much more interesting. "Those kids are simply alright, and they can be so tight," B rapped, and suddenly Yugito's smile turned into a frown and became a sigh. Raikage Mansion. Team B had just made it to the Raikage Mansion and they entered the building to see some people busy and doing paperwork. Naruto and Karui gave confused expressions, but they didn't dwell on them long before they all walked up the stairs and came into the main office. Naruto knocked on the door and awaited an answer along with his team. "Come in," shouted a voice. Naruto gripped the handle and opened the door to see Mabui in the office with a handful of documents. Mabui saw Naruto and the others enter the office, and she had to smile slightly at the close contact that her little brother had with his surrogate sibling, Karui. "Hey Mabui Nichan, where's Agigi?" Naruto asked her. It still astounded Karui, Omoi and Samui that Naruto could call the Raikage that, but even more that he didn't even mind it at all. Mabui sighed and started blankly at the room for a bit before answering. "He's late. I have to give him these documents for approval, but he's not here," Mabui said, making everyone sigh. The team then decided to sit in the office for a bit of time and wait for it to arrive. Naruto and Karui went over some kenjutsu techniques while Omoi took a short nap. Samui talked with Mabui about some things and B wrote in his book. Yugito was probably talking with Nibi if the various expressions of anger, joy, and embarrassment were anything to go by. An hour later, I came through the door and saw the glares of everyone on him, and he gave a sigh before walking to his chair and slumping into it. "Sorry about that. Council meeting took longer than expected," I told them. Everyone kept their glares on him a little longer, but then they relented and ultimately stopped. Mabui then told about the documents and them needing to be signed. I groaned, but nodded, and Mabui decided to bid everyone a goodbye before leaving. The team then turned their gazes back to the Raikage. "So Gigi, what's the good news?" Naruto asked. Suddenly stopped signing documents and grinned before turning to Yugito and B. How good do you two think these four are? I asked them. Yugito and B turned from Naruto, Omoi, Samui, and Karui then back to A. These brats are the best genin. They are the biggest thing I've ever seen, B answered then a turn to Yugito. They're all good Raikage-sama. Thanks to B and me, they have become even stronger than a good portion of our chunin, Yugito replied. I nodded and looked down at the desk for a second. Everyone felt the air get a bit colder in the room, but it didn't last long since I chuckled. Alright, that's good. Then it was a good decision to nominate them for the chunin exams, I said, shocking everyone. Naruto and Karui gasped from the shock while Samui and Omoi raised their eyebrows. So that's the good news that you wanted to tell us, Yugito said, making a nod at her. That's right. Konoha is hosting the chunin exams this time and I submitted your team as Kumo's representative. I believe you are more than capable with the exams. Plus, you have all done the required missions and more than that. So I don't see why you shouldn't go, I told them. Naruto and Karui hooked their arms around the other's shoulder and cheered along with a small jig. So when do we leave Raikage-sama? Samui asked, feeling a bit happy for their team. I grinned and took out a permission slip for the team to enter Konoha then responded. You all leave in 5 days. The competition begins next week, I told them. The entire group nodded and quickly left the Raikage mansion to pack their things for their trip to Konoha. Well, now that's what I call good news. I can't wait to show people what I can do, Karui said, pumping her fist in the air. Naruto chuckled at his sister and nodded in agreement. Well, Naruto-kun, it's about time. You've been a genin for too long. I remember you said you wanted to become a chunin along with the others, so the Raikage didn't promote you yet. So do you remember your promise? Kyuubi asked her container. Naruto nodded fast that he did remember and turned his gaze to Yugito then smiled before turning back around. I sure do, Kyuubi-chan, and don't think I haven't forgotten my promise to you, my sexy vixen, Naruto said, making Kyuubi blush at his words before smiling and receding into the seal. Meanwhile, Yugito was having her own problems with her own tenant. Come on, kitten. Naruto-kun said he found a way to release Kyuubi and maybe he can do it for me. Then when I'm free I'll show Naruto-kun my appreciation, Nibi explained with a feral grin. Yugito sighed and rubbed the back of her head. All the more reason to keep you in here and away from Naruto-kun, Yugito said mentally to her perverted Biju. Nibi huffed and she pouted slightly, but Yugito loved to mess with Nibi. It was payback for all those other times she had messed with her. Well, I'll think about it anyway, Yugito said to herself, but she got a happy Biju who was bouncing up and down in her cage. Meanwhile, Karui, Omoi, and Samui went to their homes to go pack and would meet up with Naruto in the 5 days. Naruto had gone home with Yugito and B went off to go collect some materials, leaving the male and female Jinchuriki to their lonesome. When the two entered their home, Naruto sighed and sat down on the couch. Yugito sat next to him and kept grinning at him, which made Naruto give a grin of his own. What's so funny, Yugito-chan? Naruto asked her. Yugito leaned her face forward and, surprising Naruto, she kissed him on the lips. Naruto widened his eyes at the close contact while Kyuubi and Nibi nearly gasped. The kiss didn't last long before Yugito disconnected from Naruto's lips and leaned back on her side of the couch with a blush across her face. Naruto leaned up from the kiss and turned to Yugito. What was that for, Yugi-hime? Naruto asked, still astonished at the kiss. Yugito smiled and placed the tip of her index finger on Naruto's mouth, silencing him. Just an incentive for you to work harder, Naru-kun. You don't mind, do you? Yugito asked him with a slightly innocent look. Naruto stuttered at her, but shook his head that he didn't mind at all. Can I have another incentive? Just for good measure, Naruto told her. Yugito chuckled at that and gave Naruto one more quick kiss before getting to her feet. I hope that enough of an incentive for you, she said, leaving the room with a sway in her hips. Naruto was left with his mouth hanging while he looked at the wall. Hey, Kyuubi to Kit, come in, Kit. Do you read me? Over, Kyuubi said, snapping Naruto out of his stupor. Naruto blinked his eyes a few times before shrinking into the couch. Sorry about that, Kyuubi-chan. My mind just overloaded for a second, Naruto told her. Kyuubi chuckled at her container and then got a gleam in her eyes. That's nothing compared to what I can do. I'll have to show you a good time when I get out of here, Kyuubi said, licking her lips. Naruto took note of that and stocked it away in his memory for a later notice when he made sure to get Kyuubi out of that damn cage. Meanwhile, Yugito was dealing with her Biju in the course of her own actions. See, kitten, was that so hard? You must have really enjoyed the taste of his lips. Now if only you dragged him to the bedroom and allowed him to screw you, silly, Nibi replied, making Yugito blush while steam came out her head. Shut up, Nibi. Now then, I have to go pack my things for the trip, Yugito remembered, and then shot off to her room. Naruto in turn did the same, and they continued well into the night and were actually finished in no time at all. Naruto laid on his bed and looked at the ceiling for a bit before sighing. Yen, for your thoughts? Kyuubi asked, wondering what was up. Naruto chuckled and turned on his bed. It's been 5 years since I've been to Konoha, Kyuubi-chan. I don't know whether to be happy or sad or angry about returning. Maybe I'm just thinking too much, Naruto told her. Kyuubi stayed silent for a bit since she knew what Naruto was talking about. In truth, she wasn't all that happy about returning either. Naruto had endured a lot from the village and it saddened Kyuubi when she thought about it. Well, you can at least kick some of their if they mess with you now, Kyuubi countered, making Naruto chuckle. The blonde Jinchuriki had to nod and agree with that statement, and before long he sat up and turned to a mirror and glanced at his Kumo headband. That's right. I'm a Kumo shinobi now. I want someone to try and mess with me now, Naruto said, pumping a fist in the air. Kyuubi chuckled at her container and her heart softened when she heard those words. Naruto exited his room and went downstairs when he heard Yugito call him for dinner. Since it was her turn to make dinner, Yugito went with a small, but fancy dinner of katsudon, which consisted of a large bowl with pork over top of some rice and a small Japanese hot pot with miso soup. Naruto's mouth soon began to water at the sight of all the delicious food in front of him. The blonde then turned to the female blonde and just had to ask. Why, Yugi-hime, what's the occasion for all this food? Naruto asked her, making Yugito giggle at his curiosity. It's a small celebration, Naruto-kun. I'm just happy that you are going to go to the Chunin exams. I'm proud of you, Naru-kun, so I wanted us to celebrate a bit, Yugito explained to him. Naruto smiled at her and Yugito took out 2 plates. She gave on to Naruto and the other was for herself. Naruto took the plate in his hand and used a fork to get some of the food from the boiling pot. When his plate was filled with meat, vegetables and other things, Naruto took his plate and placed it next to his katsudon plate. He then stood to his feet and let out the chair for Yugito. The Nibi Jinchuriki smiled at the gentlemanly act and sat down. Thank you, Naruto-kun, Yugito told him. Naruto nodded with a foxy grin and went back to his own seat. The two ate their food in silence, but did talk about something such as what they would do in Konoha or what they thought about their team and some things. Naruto had to almost comically cry from the taste of Yugito's cooking. Everything was perfect to his taste and nothing was too overpowering. Yugi-chan, do you remember the promise I made those 5 years ago? Naruto asked her. Yugito chewed on some of her food and then swallowed it before answering. She gave a small smile to Naruto and nodded. I do remember. It was the most amazing confession I was given. When you make Chunin, I'll have to give you an even bigger celebration, Yugito told him. Naruto grinned at that, slowly reached for Yugito's hand and gently squeezing it. And I'll have a beautiful girlfriend also, Naruto continued. Yugito blushed a deep red at that and then went back to her food, eating it a bit fast. Naruto giggled at the flustered Yugito and then went on to his own food while he mentally smirked. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna become a Chunin and then I'll get even stronger. Then I'll become the Raikage of Kumo, Naruto yelled out and Kyuubi chuckled at him, but didn't say anything. The two blondes then ate their food in silence, all the more waiting for the day they could leave Kumo and go to Konoha. 5 days later, Naruto and the others walked up to the gates of Kumo. They had spent the last 5 days preparing for the Chunin exams. They reviewed everything that they had been taught and there was nothing more they could review. Alright, let's go and have some fun. We'll show them all what Kumo is made of, Naruto told them. Everyone nodded with smiles on their faces as they passed the gates of Kumo. Alright, ya fools, let's go and make it count, B told them. Everyone nodded again and rushed through the mountains and into the trees below. In Konoha, Sarutobi was behind his desk grinning because he had received word from Kumo that they had sent their team to participate in the up-and-coming Chunin exams. A told Sarutobi who the people were and when they would arrive. Sarutobi had already made reservations for the Kumo team to stay in Konoha as he did with all the other contestants. The Hokage kept up his grin, even his paperwork couldn't bring him down from his happy mood. Well, someone seems to be in a good mood, Jiraiya said appearing from out the window. Sarutobi chuckled at his old student and shrugged his shoulders. I suppose I am. I can't wait to see Naruto-kun or see how much he's grown, Hiruzen admitted, and Jiraiya had to admit that too. The last time he had seen Naruto, the blonde was still kinda short, but he looked exactly like a miniature Minato and it stirred a sense of nostalgia in the Sannin. He'll surprise us, old man, but I'm sure Konoha's in for a rude awakening. Did you get my report about Orochimaru? Jiraiya asked and immediately Sarutobi frowned. Yeah, you said he plans to enter the Chunin exams. We'll have to remain extra vigilant then, Sarutobi replied. Jiraiya nodded and disappeared in a shunshin while Sarutobi sighed. I'm too old for all this shit, Sarutobi said to himself before lightly tapping his head on his desk. With Naruto and the others, 2 days later, Naruto and his team just made it to Konoha. They had seen the giant gates and were instantly relieved. There were no problems on their journey to Konoha, so it was a relatively smooth trip. When they walked up to the gates, they were instantly stopped by 2 gate guards. Both seemed extremely bored with their job, but when they saw the Kumo shinobi they immediately rose to their feet. State your name and purpose for being here, one of them said. Yugito came up to the guards while Naruto, Samui, Karui, and Omoi pulled out their identification. Team B here for the Chunin exams starting tomorrow, Yugito said to them. The guards looked over their information and nodded. The team went past the gates and Naruto quickly took in the sights. He felt a deep sense of nostalgia, but not the good kind. He remembered all the places he had been refused from and all the other things. The blonde sighed and decided not to dwell on these things anymore since he had other things to worry about, like getting some sleep. The sun was still up in the sky and there were many people in the village, possibly here to look forward to the Chunin exams also. It astounded the blonde that so many people were here. So this is my Ototo's former village. Not a bad place, well, not externally bad anyway, Karui said, making everyone nod. Naruto had told them about his life in Konoha and him being a Jinchuriki. It really upset the three that he had been treated so badly in Konoha, and the most obvious was Karui. She really wanted to kick someone at the time, but Naruto stopped her from doing anything drastic. B and his team passed some of the civilians and shinobi who looked their way and went to the hotel that they were assigned to. Naruto then bumped into a passing man on the shoulder and turned around. Oh, sorry about that, Naruto told him. The man waved it off and simply continued smiling. Forget it, kid, he said, walking away. Naruto walked away also, but then the man turned around to see the retreating form of the blonde genin. Why does he look so familiar? The man wondered before being on his way in the opposite direction. After about 10 more minutes, Naruto and his team finally made it to their hotel and breathed a sigh of content. It was a little extravagant for a hotel, but they didn't mind it too much and simply welcomed the sight of the hotel. Well, you guys get settled. B and I are gonna stop by the Hokage and give him a message from Raikage-sama. We'll all meet up later, Yugito said to them. Naruto made a cage bunshin and handled both their things while the two Jinchuriki walked off. Meanwhile, Naruto and Samui checked the team into the hotel and ordered 2 rooms. Samui, Karui, and Yugito would be in one room while Naruto and Omoi were in the other room. When all was said and done, the Chunin exam participants unloaded their luggage and other things. It relatively took about half an hour to unload everything and for them to get comfortable. Naruto sat on his bed and looked outside the window to see the Hokage faces. He mostly looked at his father's face and gave a small smile. Hey Naruto, you mind showing me around? Omoi suddenly asked. He didn't want to impose on Naruto or anything, but he was interested in Konoha to a degree. Naruto gave a mental chuckle and nodded. Omoi thanked him and the two headed for the door. When Naruto closed the door behind them, Karui and Samui came out of their room and stopped the two boys. Where are you guys going? Karui asked. Naruto smirked and told her that he was going to show Omoi around Konoha, or rather what he remembered of it. Both girls got gleams in their eyes and decided to tag along. When the group left the apartment, Naruto had them walk around for a bit. He took them to the park and showed them some of the stores. He had shown them the library, but he couldn't say much since he wasn't allowed in there. Omoi and Samui were saddened at that while Karui had to grit her teeth slightly, but Naruto told them to forget it and they continued. As they walked down the lanes, the 4 genin heard shouting and went to the cause of the noise. Hey, put the brat down, a genin with black hair said. It was shaped to look like a duck's. He wore a blue shirt with what they suspected to be the Uchiha symbol. He had on white pants, but other than that nothing else. Next to him was a girl with pink hair and in a red kimono-looking outfit. And lastly was a pale kid in a standard Anbu outfit. They seemed to be dealing with 2 Suna shinobi. Feeling some curiosity come over them, the 4 walked over to the group and the talking became clearer. Kankuro put the damn kid down. You're gonna get us in trouble, a blonde woman with a fan on her back stated. Shut it, Tamari. I'm gonna teach this damn kid a lesson, the now known Kankuro said to the equally known Tamari. The blonde girl sighed while Kankuro his fist back and was about to punch the kid, but was stopped by a kunai to the throat from Naruto who shocked everyone. It's bad to pick on those weaker than you, don't you think? Naruto asked, bringing his kunai closer to Kankuro's jugular. The Konoha team raised an eyebrow at Naruto before they heard Omoi groan. You just had to interfere, didn't you? Omoi asked, scratching the back of his head with a grin. Don't act like you guys weren't going to stop this also, Naruto told them. Karui and Omoi hid their own kunai and Samui hid her tanto. Now then, what's going on? Naruto asked them. The pink girl stepped up to the Kumo shinobi and stated everything like it was in a damn book. These two were causing us trouble while Sasuke-kun and Sai-san tried to stop them. They were about to hit that poor boy, the girl said to Naruto. The blonde sighed and looked at Sasuke and Sai before turning back to the Suna genin. Let's not have problems already. Now you two can leave and take your other friend with you, Naruto said, pointing his gaze to a tree. Everyone followed his gaze and saw a red-headed boy with a gourd on his back upside down. Gee Gaara, Kankuro stuttered. Everyone felt something was off with him and Gaara shunshine to the ground in a veil of sand. Kankuro, you are a disgrace to our village. Stop causing trouble, Gaara ordered. But Gaara, do you want me to you? Gaara asked, making Kankuro shut his mouth. Gaara then turned his head to Naruto and locking his gaze with the blonde. I'm sorry for my teammate. What's your name? Gaara asked. Naruto smirked and released his kunai from Kankuro's throat. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Who are you? He returned. I'm Sabaku no Gaara. I'll keep an eye on you, Namikaze, Gaara said as he and his siblings turned to leave. Naruto sighed and walked back to his own team, but was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. Hey you, fight me right now, Sasuke ordered. Karui, Samui and Omoi raised an eyebrow at his order and wondered what this guy's deal was. No thanks. See ya, Naruto said, making Sasuke grit his teeth. Sakura then narrowed her eyes at the four Kumo genin and stepped forward. Hold it, you four. Why are you even here? Shinobi from other villages need permission before coming to another village, so state your business or we will arrest you, the girl said to them. Naruto, Karui, Samui and Omoi all sweat dropped, then faltered slightly before laughing. Listen here, Naruto drew, implying for the girl to tell her name. Sakura Haruno, the now revealed Sakura said to him. Naruto nodded and continued. Listen here, Sakura, we have permission to be here. In case you didn't notice, it's the Chunin exams and other villages are participating in it also. Now if you will excuse us, we have to go, Naruto told her. Sasuke took out a kunai and threw it at Naruto, who ducked his head and Omoi caught it, then twirled it in his hands. I'm an Uchiha. You will fight me right now. Sasuke yelled and Naruto immediately hated the guy. He was like a power-hungry emo or something like that. Look, if you want to fight me so much, then do it in the Chunin exams, alright? I'll be more than happy to kick your any day, Naruto said to him. Sasuke gritted his teeth and Sakura narrowed her eyes at Naruto, but Sai did nothing but give a weird smile. Well, that could have gone better, Karui said with a grin. It took a bit of time, but Naruto had pretty much finished the entire tour of the places he remembered, but he had one more stop that he wanted to show them. Karui, Omoi, and Samui were confused as to what Naruto wanted to show them, but when he brought them to a small little stand, they could only fathom a guess as to what he wanted to show them. Naruto came through the curtains, blocking the view of a woman and an elderly man working. Naruto smiled as he remembered the nostalgia of the two in front of him. It almost brought the blonde to tears, but he resisted so as not to get the unwanted sympathy from his two surrogate sisters and his best friend. Naruto guided Samui, Karui, and Omoi to the stool, and Naruto decided to bid the two a hello. Ayame-chan, how are you doing? Naruto asked, and immediately he was met with a frying pan to the face. Karui, Omoi and Samui tensed when they saw that and immediately narrowed their eyes at the woman in front of them, but seeing her eyes, there was sadness and anger. Don't call me that. You people kidnapped Naruto-kun and Kami only knows where he is. Say what you want and get the hell out. Ayame yelled, and soon the three Kumo shinobi sweat dropped. So it wasn't entirely her fault that she threw the pan at Naruto. Speaking of the blonde, Naruto rubbed his face where there was a mark from the pan on the side of his face. Naruto sighed and looked over his features. Let's see, blonde hair, blue eyes, whisker marks, and a ramen lover. That sounds like me, Ayame-chan, Naruto said to her. Ayame raised an eyebrow and looked Naruto over. There was the undeniable whisker marks, the blue eyes, and the blonde hair. Ayame wasn't sure about the ramen part, but something about him made her believe that. Suddenly she saw the Kumo headband and narrowed her eyes. Well, you're not from Konoha, so how do I know you're really Naruto? Ayame asked with a small smile. Naruto raised an eyebrow, before grinning and slamming his hands on the table, surprising everyone. Get me your largest bowl of miso ramen and I'll eat it all in under 10 minutes, Naruto said, making Ayame widen her eyes and Tsuki to stare at Naruto with his mouth hanging. Samui, Omoi, and Karui were confused as to the scene in front of them, but it was very amusing, so they watched it play out. Ayame turned to her father and smiled. One Naruto special too, san, Ayame told him. Tsuki reluctantly nodded and got to cooking. It took about 20 minutes of waiting, but soon a big bowl was placed in front of Naruto along with a timer. Naruto grabbed a pair of chopsticks and his mouth watered at the sight of the ramen in front of him. If he eats that whole thing, he'll have surpassed Yugito-sensei's level of hunger, Samui said, watching the blonde about to eat. Samui knew about Yugito's appetite and she knew about Naruto's appetite. Both trained too much, and with their rivalry, they managed to stay remarkably thin. Go Ototo. Kumo Nin never backed down from a challenge, Karui silently cheered. Oh man, what happens if he can't finish the bowl? How much will we have to pay? Will we all go bankrupt from having to pay for this meal? Omoi thought and shivered at the same time. He always had the habit of over-exaggerating, but this was probably his latest one to date. Ayame hit the timer and Naruto dove into the bowl of noodles. The blonde wasted no time and immediately started to slurp up the noodles like his very life depended on it. Karui cheered Naruto on and the blonde only went faster, surprising Tsuki and Ayame. They were both convinced now. Only Naruto could eat ramen like that, and the sight brought Ayame to tears and Tsuki to a full-grown smile. Samui, Omoi and Karui all saw their expressions and they smiled also. They finally realized that it was Naruto and no one else. Naruto placed the chopsticks down and drank the thick broth as he reminisced about the ramen he loved so much. Naruto placed the bowl down and was immediately brought into a hug by Ayame, who was crying her heart out. Naruto chuckled and wrapped Ayame into a hug while Tsuki stopped the timer and smiled at the result. Naruto had finished the entire bowl in 6 minutes. He really was their old Naruto. Naruto, you're alive. When did you get back? How have you been? Where have you been? All these questions Ayame asked, and Naruto was more than happy to answer them all for her. In that order: today, I've been good, and I've been in Kumo for the past 5 years, Naruto replied to each question in order. Ayame and Tsuki chuckled and decided to close the store early for a special occasion. Tsuki served Karui, Omoi and Samui some of his best ramen and the trio looked it over. The aroma was intoxicating for all three and soon they heard Omoi's stomach rumble. Wow, Omoi, you must really be hungry, Karui said to him, and Omoi blushed in embarrassment, but soon all three were eating and Karui's eyes instantly gleamed. This isn't normal. Now I see why you love it so much, Otudo. The broth really sets the noodles in a world of goodness. It's quite good, Karui said, taking in her fill of the warm noodles. Naruto, Ayame, and Tsuki smiled as they watched their new customers eat the ramen that was prepared for them. Samui seemed to still have an impassive look on her face, but Naruto saw her usually cold eyes brightened up ever so slightly as she continued eating. Omoi found the noodles to be good also, but he was going at a lower pace than Karui since he probably wanted to savor the taste of the noodles in his mouth. When Samui, Karui and Omoi were finished with their noodles, Naruto gave them a grin which was basically asking each of them how it tasted. It was good, Otudo, Karui said with a smile and a thumbs up. It definitely not a terrible food to say the least, Omoi stated, making Naruto glare at him slightly. Omoi chuckled at Naruto's reaction to his answer and simply rubbed the back of his head while smiling. Naruto then turned to Samui and everyone else turned to her too. Samui's sweat dropped at their anticipation of her answer and she tried to keep her impassive face while replying. It was cool, Samui said as she walked out of the stand. Ayame and Tsuki raised an eyebrow at her, but Naruto simply told them that it was her own way of complimenting them. Samui told everyone that she would be going back to the hotel to get some rest for tomorrow. The others nodded and Samui walked off back to the hotel, leaving Naruto, Karui, Omoi, Ayame and Tsuki to talk with each other. It was relatively a long talk too. Naruto talked about his life in Kumo and his training with Yugito and along with his sibling rivalry with Karui, who he mentioned was his surrogate older sister. Naruto introduced Omoi as his best friend, making said genin give an embarrassed blush. Ayame and Tsuki were relieved that Naruto was able to find a good place where the people accepted him. Though even if Naruto didn't say it, they knew he wouldn't return to Konoha like they would have wanted, but Naruto told them he would be around since Kumo's treaty with Konoha was really good. That information made the two ramen makers smile as they would get to see Naruto when he would be around. It was then that Karui and Ayame started talking about Naruto when he was younger, or as far as they knew him, and the information being spread made Naruto sigh. No one really noticed the time, but it was getting dark and Naruto, Karui, and Omoi had to get back. Well, Ayame-chan, we have to go. I'll see you later, Naruto told her. Ayame nodded and the two decided to bid Naruto a farewell as the three Kumo genin left the stand behind. They're good people. I guess Konoha isn't as low down as I thought, Karui said, making Naruto and Omoi nod. It didn't take long for the three to reach their hotel and the three instantly went to their rooms. Naruto and Omoi went into their room while Karui went to hers. When Naruto and Omoi entered, they saw B on the bed while writing in his little book before said man looked up and smiled at the two of them. Ya fools, where ya been? B asked while Naruto and Omoi slumped on their side of the beds. Naruto quickly took off his jacket and his mesh shirt showing a simple, white t-shirt. He unpacked all the things he was carrying and so did Omoi. We were just touring Konoha. It's been a long time since I've been here so I showed everyone around. Is Yugi Haim back? Naruto asked. B leaned his head on a pillow and looked up at the ceiling with his own grin while adjusting his shades. Yugi-chan went to sleep. She said she was feeling tired. I'm going out like a light too. Night ya fools, B said as he turned out the lamplight and went to sleep. Naruto and Omoi chuckled and went to sleep also. It was finally the day of the Chunin exams and both would be ready for whatever it threw at them. Next morning, Naruto, Karui, Omoi, and Samui could be seen walking towards the Konoha Academy. It was finally the day of the Chunin exams and they were bright and early for it too. Naruto seemed more pumped up than usual, but for probably a good reason. Omoi seemed more tired than usual while Karui was just as energetic as Naruto. Samui was the usual calm person in the group so she didn't say much. Alright, is everyone ready? Naruto asked them. Samui, Karui, and Omoi nodded while Yugito and B patted their genin on their shoulders. Alright guys, it's time show everyone da power of Kumo ya fools, B said and everyone nodded. B and Yugito then vanished out of sight while Naruto and his team came into the academy building. Naruto looked over the halls of the old building and sighed. It was just the same as when he left. It was also crowded with genin of all ages. Soon Naruto, Karui, Omoi, and Samui went up the flight of stairs and instantly saw a group of genin crowded around one door. They observed a scuffle between a genin from Konoha with a buzz cut and green spandex fighting another genin who was blocking the door. Please let us through. We have to take the exams, a girl with two buns in her hair said to them. Both genin scoffed and stood back at the door. Please, you'll just die. We're doing you a favor by stopping you, one of them said to the Chunin examinees. Karui sighed and rubbed the bridge of her nose and Naruto shook his head at all of them. Omoi had to lightly chuckle while Samui narrowed her eyes, but the four kept walking up the stairs as Naruto whispered to his team. Such a pathetic display of genjutsu. Though I have to thank Mabui Onichan for those genjutsu lessons or I might be like those guys standing there with stupid looks on their faces, Naruto muttered and Karui chuckled with a nod. The four walked up one more flight of stairs, but stopped when they heard someone talk. Enough with this damn genjutsu. This is only the second floor. We still need to go to the third floor, Sasuke said, making everyone widen their eyes. Naruto and the others saw Sakura had hearts in her eyes aimed at Sasuke while Sai had on his creepy smile as usual. It was then that one of the genin pointed to Naruto's team and smirked. Then maybe you should follow that team since they've got better directional sense than any of you, one of them said, and suddenly everyone was staring at the Kumo genin. Naruto sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. This just became harder for them. That was the start of the test and people would have failed for not figuring it out if the damned Uchiha kept his mouth shut, but the damage was done now. However, on a closer inspection, Naruto saw another Konoha genin who seemed to be scowling at them and the Suna genin from yesterday who looked at him impassively like always. Sasuke suddenly seethed, but huffed his annoyance until he heard Sai speak while taking out a small notepad with an ink pen and started drawing. See Sasuke, I told you that you should have kept your big mouth shut, or is that big mouth in compensation for your tiny? Sai asked, making Sasuke stare daggers at his teammate before they saw the green spandex genin walk up to them. Who the hell are you? Sasuke asked in a pissed off tone. The genin then gave a thumbs up and his teeth sparkled, making everyone back away from him. I am Rock Lee and I presume that you are Sasuke Uchiha. Let us do battle. The now known Lee said the Uchiha. Sasuke smirked as he locked eyes with Lee. You know I'm an Uchiha, yet you still want to fight me. You've got guts, Sasuke replied, and Naruto had to admit that it seemed interesting to see, but there were other things more important, so the blonde walked off with his team, leaving Sasuke's team to fight it out with the other Konoha genin. Team Jinchuriki walked a little longer until they came up to a door while seeing Yugito and be waiting for them. What are you guys doing here? Naruto asked them. Yugito grinned and walked up to them. We just wanted to see you off. It gets real from here, so give it all you've got, guys, Yugito told them. Naruto nodded along with his sister, Karui. Samui gave a small smile and Omoi cracked his knuckles. Before they went in though, Naruto grabbed Yugito's arm and took her to the side of the room. Wish me luck, Yugi Haim. By the end of these exams you'll be mine, Naruto told her. Yugito chuckled and poked Naruto in the forehead. She did have the decency to blush, and she heard Nibi telling her that she would be in for one hell of a ride when they matured in their relationship, making Yugito's blush deepen a bit more. Good luck, Naruto-kun, Yugito said in a soft voice that made Naruto's legs tremble slightly, making Yugito giggle. The two returned and then Yugito and B vanished out of sight. Naruto grinned and turned to Karui, who was smiling also. He turned to Omoi, who nodded for him to proceed, and lastly he turned to Samui, who merely nodded with a small grin. All right then. Let's go, Naruto said, and he pushed the doors open. The entire team walked through and were instantly graced with the weak key of the hundreds of applicants around the exam room. You think that's a ki? Kyuubi-chan mind helping me out? Naruto mentally thought, and his vixen was more than happy to comply. Go on, Naruto-kun. Show these weaklings what you can do, Kyuubi said, and while channeling some of Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto forced his ki around the room, making almost all the genin choke from the fierce amount. The ki wasn't directed at his team, but they knew what he was doing, and it made them all mentally chuckle before Naruto toned it down and allowed everyone the pleasure of breathing again. Hee, nice job, Otuto. You scared everyone shitless with that one, Karui said, patting Naruto on the back. Naruto grinned with a nod, but then the same person who scowled at him earlier decided to make an appearance in front of him along with Lee and the female member of their team. So Kumo, are you going to try and kidnap us again, or is this treaty going to last this time? A Hyuga asked. The only reason Naruto knew he was a Hyuga was because he knew about Raikage's fascination with the Hyuga bloodline, and Naruto was sure that with the way this Hyuga was acting it was kind of obvious what he was. I don't know what the hell your problem is, but don't go disrespecting my village Tem, Naruto said with a glare, and the Hyugas matched his own. Neji, that's enough. We can't fight just yet. Let it go, the female said, and Lee nodded with her. Tenten's right, Neji. It's unyouthful to attack our opponents when they haven't done anything wrong yet, Lee said, and the now identified Tenten nodded also. Neji's scowl deepened and spoke to his teammates, but he never broke the glaring match he had with Naruto. Kumo's wrong in every sense of the word. You guys better pray to Kami that I don't find you, or it'll be the last time you breathe, Neji said and walked away. Naruto narrowed his eyes, and so did the Kumo genin. Just like Naruto, they knew about Kumo's odd fascination with the Hyuga's Byakugan, but after the treaty was signed, Kumo had pretty much stopped all attempts at taking the Hyuga's dojutsu. Maybe they still didn't forgive Kumo for what they did, but there wasn't any fixing the past, only the future. Well, looks like you guys experienced Neji's hatred. Sorry about that. He's always troublesome with his pride, a pineapple hair-shaped genin said, and behind him was a fat genin and a blonde one. Almost following them were other Konoha genin. There was a kid with a dog on his head, one whose face was covered by glasses and a trench coat, and a girl who seemed to be looking at Naruto with an embarrassed blush. Naruto felt he remembered them all from somewhere, but for the life of him, he couldn't remember. Shikamaru, why are we talking to them? They're our opponents, the girl with blonde hair said, making the known Shikamaru sigh and rub the back of his head. Damn it, Ino, you're so troublesome. Opponent or not, it's rude to not say something after what Neji did. Besides, Konoha and Kumo are allies due to the treaty, Shikamaru explained, and Ino just huffed. Shikamaru's munch right, Ino. Don't be so munch mean, the fat kid said before Ino smacked him upside the head. Shut up, Choji. You need to go on a diet right now anyway, Ino said, making Choji get depressed. Karui chuckled at his expense along with Naruto. Omoi raised an eyebrow while wondering if all Konoha genin were like this. Samui didn't really reply to anything since she didn't feel like talking. I hope you guys are ready, cause we're gonna beat each and every last one of you, the dog boy said with a feral grin. Naruto raised an eyebrow while Karui chuckled. You. Yeah right, dog boy. That'll be the day, Karui replied, making the boy snarl. See, calm down, Kiba-kun. It wouldn't be good to entice our competition. Right, Shino-kun? The girl is the boy in the trench coat. Shino nodded and stepped forward. Hinata is right, Kiba. We don't know how strong they are. It would be unwise to underestimate them, Shino said while looking closely at Naruto. Soon the door behind them opened, showing a messed up Sasuke along with Sakura and Sai. Sasuke-kun! Ino yelled while draping her arms over Sasuke's back. Sai rolled his eyes and went back to drawing while Sakura grew a tick mark. Said pink-haired girl grabbed Ino and the two immediately started to duel with each other over the proud Uchiha. What the hell are they doing? Karui asked, pointing at Sakura and Ino. Everyone else sighed and looked at the scene, and it brought a bit of embarrassment and shame to the group of Konoha genin. This is normal, or rather as close to it as can be. Sorry you have to see this, Shikamaru said before everyone heard shouting. Get away from Sasuke-kun, Ino pig. Sakura shouted. Shut the hell up, forehead. Sasuke-kun is mine, Ino yelled, making everyone sigh. Karui and Samui personally rolled their eyes. Fangirls were the worst type of kunoichi. They were also the type to die faster than anyone else. Sheesh. Bringing shame upon proud kunoichi that train like hell every day to prove themselves only to be considered weak because of girls like this. If I fight them, I'll teach them both what being a true kunoichi is about, Karui said mentally while tightening her fist. Pathetic, Samui thought before ignoring the two girls in front of everyone. That was before another genin showed up with who had silver hair and the Konoha headband. Geez, it's like Naruto's team was a stupid magnet for them. You guys don't seem to understand the situation here. Please look at that, the guy said, and everyone looked to see countless people glaring at them, but for an obvious reason they avoided Naruto's team and instead directed their ki at the Konoha shinobi. Nearly everyone cowered or felt the pressure before Omoi decided to help them out and switch the conversation. And who are you? Omoi asked, bringing everyone back to the man. Said man smirked and adjusted the glasses on his face. I'm Kabuto Yakushi. I'm also a genin like you. I've taken this exam 7 times, Kabuto said, making Naruto, Karui, Omoi and Samui narrow their eyes at him. No one's that much, and having that much experience should be more than enough to pass the exams. Something was wrong with the guy, but they decided to not judge just yet. Wow, you must really then, Kiba said with a laugh, and Kabuto's eyebrow twitched before he sighed. Or rather, it means that I have a lot of experience and intel on the other competitors. I thought I'd help my fellow genin out. Tell me what you want to know about a person. My info cards will help, Kabuto said, and everyone smiled or grinned at him. Soon Sasuke stepped forward and decided to jump at the chance. Fine, I'd like information on Rock Lee, Sabaku no Gaara, and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, Sasuke said, and he immediately heard the gasps from multiple people, as did some of the members widen their eyes. Namikaze. Where have I heard that name before? Shikamaru wondered, as did Shino and Hinata. The other rookie 9 had never heard of the Namikaze name, but with the way some of the competitors tensed, especially those from Iwagakure, they figured it was something important. Naruto, however, knew what that meant, and so did his team. The blonde had just become known to most as the Yondaime's son, and now he would be a target. Ah, you know their names. That ruins all the fun, Kabuto said before channeling chakra through the cards and taking 3 from the deck. Kabuto looked at the first on with Rock Lee on it. Rock Lee. His teammates are Neji Hyuga and Tenten Higurashi. He has completed 25 D rank missions and 3 C rank missions. He is currently the best taijutsu user in Konoha, only being topped by Kakashi Hatake and Maida Guy, Kabuto announced from the card. Sasuke narrowed his eyes and so did Naruto. So bushy brows is better than I thought, Naruto thought while Kabuto took out the next card and read it aloud for everyone to hear. Next is Sabaku no Gaara. His teammates are Sabaku no Tamari and Sabaku no Kankuro. He's completed 3 C rank missions, 4 B rank missions and, damn, 1 A rank mission. It says that he hasn't gotten hurt one time in any of these missions, Kabuto said, making everyone gulp, but Naruto, Karui, Omoi, and Samui all smirked from that little bit of information. Interesting to hear. To fight someone who never got hurt once even in an A- rank mission. It was downright exciting to fight someone like that. Kabuto went on and took out the last card. Naruto could have taken that card and torn it to shreds, but for some reason he wanted to know his stats also. It might be fun to know, he figured. Plus, maybe he could find out about who this guy really was if him and his team played along. Let's see. Here we go. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. His teammates are Karui, Omoi and Samui from Kumo. He's completed 15 D rank missions, 6 C rank missions and 2 B rank missions. It says he used to come from Konoha, but now he's in Kumo, Kabuto said, shocking the entire group of Konoha genin. Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head while the rookie 9 narrowed their eyes at him to see if they even remembered him. Don't strain yourselves. You won't remember me. You never gave me the time of day during my early life either, Naruto said, letting out a little bit of venom in his voice, though not intentionally. Karui lowered her eyes in sadness at Naruto's words and so did Omoi. Samui placed a hand on his shoulder and Naruto sighed. Well, whatever. It's in the past anyway, Naruto said, and suddenly a puff of smoke appeared, making everyone cough and get back. Soon a man with a bandana on his head appeared and slammed his hands on the table. All right, you maggots. Sit down and shut the hell up. I'm Ibiki, your proctor for this portion of the exams, and I welcome you to the gates of hell, Ibiki said to them. Everyone raised their eyebrows at him before Ibiki slammed his hand to the blackboard behind them. Alright, listen up, cause I won't repeat this. You will all have a written exam. There are 9 questions each. Each question earns you a point. There will be no cheating. If you're caught cheating 5 times, you will be removed from the exams. Now then, come and take a number and go to your assigned seats. When the time is finished, there will be a 10th question. I suggest you try to stay alive till then, Ibiki said to them. Everyone walked up to the front and took a number, and before long they all went to their assigned seats. They were all handed a test and Naruto raised an eyebrow, and before long he panicked. Damn it, I hate written exams. Naruto mentally yelled out, and he heard Kyuubi chuckling at the back of his head. Alright, the test begins. Now, Ibiki yelled, and everyone immediately got to writing. Naruto looked over the questions and he quickly placed it down. There was no way in hell he could answer these. Hell, he doubt even Samui could answer these, and she was the smartest out of the 4 of them, so what was the point to this? Naruto slowly turned his eyes to see Sasuke mimicking the strokes of the person in front of him, and Gaara was using his sand to look for answers. Naruto sighed and looked at his test paper. What the hell? This is too damn hard. I doubt even a Chunin could answer this, and what's with these half-given questions? It's like he wants me to che. Naruto suddenly slammed his head on his table and looked back up at his paper. Of course. It's so damn obvious. He wants us to cheat. He daring us all to acquire information and not get caught doing it, Naruto thought, and suddenly smirked. It was all a mind game to this guy. Well, he'd be damned if he lost like this. Kyuubi-chan, mind helping me cheat? Naruto asked her. Kyuubi chuckled at Naruto's slyness. He really was just like a fox. Sure, Naruto-kun. I'm glad you figured it out. Now then, let me see that paper, Kyuubi said, and Naruto did just that. Over the course of 10 minutes, Kyuubi told Naruto the answers to each problem with accurate detail and the blonde was finished in no time. Naruto set his paper aside and with a quick flash of his eyes he saw Omoi and Karui having some trouble. Samui was mostly alright as she used on of the mirrors in the room to her advantage and looked over someone's answers. Naruto smirked and decided to help his best friend and his surrogate older sister. The blonde knew that he would get caught at least once with this, but it was worth it for them to pass. Naruto took out a single kunai from underneath his jacket's sleeves and flung it at Omoi's desk. As he expected, Naruto got caught and it was jotted down. When the kunai hit the front of Omoi's desk, the white-haired boy looked up and saw Naruto with a hidden smirk across his face. Moving his hand slightly, the blonde went through several hand signs for a Morse code and Omoi grinned with a nod. Phew, I thought Naruto was gonna let the pressure get to him. Then it would have been up to me to pass and then Naruto would have felt bad which would have caused him to hate me in the end, Omoi thought, but he moved it from his thoughts and took out a kunai also. He was jotted down also when he threw it precisely at Karui's paper. The redhead was about to retort, but she saw Omoi going through the hand signs that Naruto had taught them a few years ago. It was meant for exact situations like this. Man, am I glad that my Otudo came up with that. Now I can move like I want, Karui thought, and like clockwork, the two genin began to spy on others' paper. Omoi adjusted his headband slightly and due to a small reflection on a mirror to the side, he allowed Karui to see the next couple of answers and in turn, Karui adjusted her own headband down and Omoi looked at the mirror in front of him just a few feet above Ibiki. He saw, thanks to that reflection, he saw the answers to a paper in front of Karui and he began to write. In no time, Karui and Omoi finished and covered their papers. Samui finished also and saw that Naruto, Karui and Omoi had all finished also. Then, they just had to wait. Number 35 fail. Number 23 and 78 fail, Ibiki called out making the three genin leave. Soon another team was called out after that also. Number 26 fail. Number 45 and 83 fail, he called out again thus eliminating the ones who got caught. This continued for another 10 minutes and in that time 6 other groups were called out and suddenly time was finished. Alright maggots, stop writing. I'm surprised that the lot of you made it. Now then, before we begin the 10th question, I want to know something. Do you want to attempt this question? Ibiki asked and everyone was utterly confused. Sakura suddenly raised her hand to get Ibiki's attention. What happens if we don't take the question? Sakura asked and somewhere deep inside, she was regretting asking that question. Ibiki turned to her and glared making Sakura shiver. Well, obviously you fail, but if you take this question and fail, you will be branded a genin forever, so I'm giving you a way out, Ibiki said and immediately people began to get upset. What the hell? That's not fair. Tamari yelled, but everyone was silenced by Ibiki's key. Shut up. My exam, my rules. You're all just too damn unlucky to have me for a proctor, but lucky for you I'm giving you mercy, so will you take this question or not? Ibiki asked. Naruto, Samui, Omoi and Karui already knew that was bullshit. This guy couldn't control that, especially not for other people's villages. He's no Kage and his rule sure as hell doesn't apply to Konoha, much less Kumo or another of the other villages. However, most people weren't that smart and easily gave up. At least 4 groups left the room and with each one leaving, Naruto's tick mark grew wider on his head before the blonde slammed his hands on the table startling everyone. Come on people, grow some damn balls. What shinobi doesn't take risks for their village? We put our lives on the line every day and you are all scared of a stupid question. So what if you're a genin for the rest of your life? It's just a damn rank. In the shinobi world rank means nothing. Now sit down and wait for the damn question. Naruto said and sat down with a huff of annoyance. Samui closed her eyes and grinned while Karui chuckled and Omoi sighed. It was just more work for them, but hey, it wouldn't be interesting if everyone left, would it? He's convinced everyone to stay. Hokage-sama did say he would be an interesting one. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze I guess that's it, Ibiki mentally said and huffed, but then smirked. Congratulations on passing the first part of the exam. That's it, Ibiki said to them. Everyone was instantly confused and Ibiki chuckled at their reactions. What do you mean we passed? What about the 10th question? Sakura asked and Ibiki sighed. That was the 10th question. It was whether or not you would accept the question despite the consequences if you failed. It was to test your resolve of becoming Chunin. In the shinobi world, one doesn't have the luxury of choosing their missions. Ibiki paused to remove his bandana and everyone stared at the numerous cuts, burns, and lacerations that came across his scalp and Ibiki continued on. You will be required to send your men into duty knowing full well that they might die. Those who wish to abandon a mission and let their men live to fight another day aren't shinobi, at least not in my book, but you all made it and you can go with you heads held high, Ibiki said tying his bandana back on. Everyone suddenly cheered that they made it and were all happy with their accomplishments. Well, that wasn't so hard, Naruto said to himself, and though he didn't know it, Kyuubi rolled her eyes and chuckled softly, wanting to refute his words when she remembered how he acted when he didn't know the answers. The celebration didn't last long before a cloth bursted into the room, scaring the hell out of some people, and then it stuck to the ceiling and the floor, making a banner with a woman who had purple hair in a pineapple shape. Seriously, what was with all the pineapple-shaped hairstyles? Did everyone in Konoha suddenly grow a fetish for pineapples while Naruto was away, or was this a new sense of fashion that he didn't know about? Don't get comfortable, Gaki. I'm Enko Mitarashi and I'm the proctor for the second part of the exam. Now follow me to the next stage. Let's go. Enko yelled with her fist pumped in the air. For Naruto, who slammed his head on the table again, it was official. Konoha had become a breeding place for weirdos while he was gone. Ibiki appeared from behind the banner and narrowed his eyes. You're early, again, Ibiki said, and Anko's sweat dropped before looking over the room to see a significant number of genin still in the room. What the hell, Ibiki? 48 people passed. You're losing your touch, Anko said, and Ibiki chuckled. Or we've got a stronger crop this year, Ibiki said to her. Anko grinned and twirled a kunai in her hand while looking all the genin over. Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. When I'm done with everyone, more than half these people will be dead, Anko said in a slightly menacing tone, making the genin gulp at what she had planned. Anko then walked towards the hole she made and turned to everyone. Alright people, get a move on. You should know where to meet, so get going. If you're late by 5 minutes then you're disqualified, Anko said, jumping out of the hole and running off. Naruto grinned and his team reassembled together. Well, let's go. We read the map and based on where she's going we can get there too, Naruto told them. Samui, Karui and Omoi nodded and touched Naruto clothes. Naruto then vanished in a lightning shunshin, shocking all the genin present and some of the chunin who wondered how a genin knew such a technique. With Yugito and B was currently in a room looking over his wrapping book, but he couldn't focus. He was more set on Yugito, who had been pacing the floor for at least half an hour. Yugi-chan, calm down. Day is gonna be alright, they all really know how to fight, B told her. Yugito's sweat dropped, but sighed and eventually stopped walking. I know B, but I can't help but be nervous, Yugito said while she continued walking. It was then that she heard Nibi sigh and she wondered what her Biju wanted. Man kitten, calm down. Have some faith in Naruto-kun and his team. Seeing you pace for that half an hour made even me tired. Just calm down and it will all be fine, Nibi said, reassuring Yugito. The blonde woman sighed and walked over to a couch and into it. She then rummaged through her backpack and took out a book on jutsu creation. Naruto inspired her to make more of her own techniques like he did over the years, and she told herself that she wouldn't lose to Naruto, so she had the idea for a Kaden jutsu and now she just needed to read the book to understand the mechanics behind it. Yugito read for a bit and in little to no time, her legs started to move slightly and then a bit more. By then it was too much and the Nibi Jinchuriki jumped to her feet and started to pace the floor again.